Well, we hope you didn't pick Notre Dame to cover or bet the under. Yeah, interesting game to say the least, and where the over was gone in the first half. So, yeah, Lou, I know we both picked a Notre Dame cover. All I can say is, guys, I hope you didn't listen to us when making your picks for this game. Certainly a different script than we would have pictured, huh, Lou?
Now, wait a second. I think in the game predictions on Friday, I had it 31-13, and I think the spread was 20.5.
Okay. All right. Well,
So,
I'm not.
that's one of those deals. One of these deals when Chris Tyree at the end there, from the 2 yard line on fourth down, uh, you were like, dang, he didn't get it in, but I covered.
Yeah, I'm sorry for everyone's out there who. Sorry for your losses if that touchdown had some meaning to you guys or lack
Don't
thereof.
gamble. Don't gamble.
Especially in this year. I mean, just betting on college football is going to drive you crazier even this year, even more than what it would normally. I mean, just I'll give this for free advice. Don't bet on a game where a team hasn't played in 3 weeks. Just you're gonna live a lot easier and not be on the edge. So anyway, there's your free advice. Welcome to the latest Irish Huddle. I'm Patrick Engel. He's the venerable Lou Somogyi. And Lou, yeah, I mean, like we talked about, not the game script we would have foreseen, but still, I mean, Notre Dame beat Florida State by 16 points, right? Is that my math correct on that? Yes, 42 to
42-26.
26. And I don't know about you, but I never really felt this game was in doubt. Like, I mean, nowhere in there, even as Florida State mounted some drives and put some early points on the board, that I think Notre Dame was actually going to lose or even need like a final drive score to like remove any doubt from this thing.
Yeah, I may have felt that way with Duke earlier in this year, where Notre Dame won that game 27-13, because Duke just doesn't recruit at the same level. But with Florida State, there was some trepidation, because at times you saw that individual talent flash. You're saying to yourself, this team has got some dudes. They've got some major league talent. And when they went ahead 17-14, especially the fact that it's 14-3 Notre Dame, and you're thinking, okay, they're about to throw it in, probably quit for the rest of the evening, call it a night. And when they came back and took the lead at 17-14, I'm thinking, they may be getting that confidence back. They may be getting the swagger back, and it's starting to grow. I liked how Notre Dame responded. I thought it was extremely important when right before halftime, when Florida State cut it to 28-20, I believe there was 117 left, made it a one-score game, and they were going to receive the second half kickoff. When Jafar Armstrong returned the kickoff 36 yards to the 43-yard line, and Notre Dame tallied with 11 seconds left and put them within arm's length there at 35-20 at halftime, I thought that was really crucial, because indeed Florida State took that second half kickoff and went in for a score, and it would have been 28-26 instead of 35-26. Now, if Notre Dame didn't score, I don't know how Florida State might have reacted. I'm just saying that was a pivotal point in the game. And look, if Sean Crawford doesn't make that interception with about 8 minutes left, it's a one-score game, at the goal line there. So I wouldn't say I was totally comfortable. I thought Notre Dame was going to win, but just because of the individual talent that Florida State possesses, there was some more consternation than there would have been like against a Duke.
Oh yeah, and I think Florida State's resolve was a surprising, and at least if you go off the first two games, it was, and credit to them for, like you said, not really folding. I thought they did a lot of good things. We talked last week about all right, what is this quarterback change actually going to mean? But I think it can really give them a boost. And we saw the challenge that can be to defend with the quarterback run. So, but at the same time, yeah, I wasn't even within that thinking like they're going to actually hold on to that lead or mount a comeback all the way. But to your point, I mean, what garbage time was 2 drives at the end. So I mean, yeah, I didn't foresee it being competitive-ish for that long, like you said, until Sean Crawford's interception on the goal line. But anyway, let's dive into really what happened here. But first, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, smash that thumbs up button. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube page, and you can follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _ that's ENGEL, and at BGI _ Lou Somogyi, SOMOGYI. And the best way to support this podcast is to subscribe to blueandgold.com. So I think the at least most interesting or surprising thing, just if you look at obviously the Notre Dame defense's track record is 26 points, whatever. Some more chunk plays, and it was just kind of a generally there's leaky is what I might use to describe the defense. Obviously, it's the unit that showed, I think, more effects of not having played for 3 weeks. And we heard Brian Kelly say, yeah, a lot of these guys didn't really practice even in actual game week. So I think that showed up. But overall, Florida State had 9 points in the last, it was maybe 40 minutes or so.
45. They scored with 38 seconds left in the first quarter. So you're looking at 45 minutes, or really, to be exact, 44 minutes and I guess 22 seconds.
Right. And so, yeah, either way, they didn't really keep up that trend of score fast. I mean, they tried to use tempo and all the runs and options and quarterback runs in particular, and the shot plays with Tamori and Terry that did some damage. But yeah, credit to Notre Dame for still keeping them off the scoreboard. I guess you can call it bend but don't break. You're right. It was 45 minutes and change there with they had 17 points in the first quarter and 9 the rest of the way. So I don't know, Lou. I mean, what's your takeaway from this defensive performance and what we saw?
I think this is something that is not unusual at all this year. When you looked at the scoreboard on Saturday, you see Alabama 63, Ole Miss 48. You see now number 5 North Carolina 56, Virginia Tech 45. I mean, sometimes these ACC basketball games are not going to have these type of scores here. And it goes just right down the line with so many programs. LSU, my goodness, they gave up 44 points to Mississippi State in the opener, and now they give up 45 points to Missouri. This has always been a pretty renowned defense at LSU, and Ed Orgeron's a defensive coach. And some of it, Patrick, I wonder, with the COVID-19, how much tackling, how much of that fundamental work in this era of social distancing, where in football social distancing is not a good idea, but we see it.
Unless you're the LSU secondary.
Yeah. We're seeing it more and more often now. This is the way of football anyway now in the 2020s, and it's been trending that way for the last really 40 years with the passing attacks, the rules that are geared in the favor of offenses. There's really not, I wouldn't use that term dominant for defense anymore. If you can hold teams under 20 points, that's a great effort. We put the stat there that in 29 games with Clark Lee, and 28 of them, the opponent scored 30 or less. And it's like, well, what's so great about that? You look around college football, that's pretty darn impressive. Alabama, and Nick Saban's one of the best defensive minds around. This is, I think, like the third time in the last 8 games they've allowed more than 40 points in a game, and 48 to Ole Miss. Which hasn't always been a juggernaut out there. Now, Alabama's had problems with them over the years, but when you start winning games like that, 63-48 and 56-45 with North Carolina, just right down the line. The 53-45 Oklahoma, Texas, Red River shootout, I don't count as much because 4 overtimes, but that's the Big 12, where we've long said that defense is a rumor in that league. So that that's really what college football pretty much has become. I've compared it. It's almost like the now defunct Arena Football League. Is defense is not really about dominance. It's more about damage control. Can you get a turnover? Can you force a fumble? Or, God, heaven forbid, force a punt?
Here's what I take away from maybe, I think more so just this game from a Notre Dame perspective, but in college football in general, is that I think if you have a team that has a layoff or has a game postponed or just has to stop football activities for virus related reasons, and that's happened to a lot, the thing that takes more time to catch up, or it will be rustier, or is harder to come back from, I guess, is defense compared to offense. I guess because it's harder to get the speed, the tackling, all of that you can't really do and time away from is more costly. I'm not sure I would have said that before the season. Like if you asked the question, okay, take a team and give them a layoff, and what's going to be the thing that's more disjointed of it, I'm not sure I would have obviously defaulted to defense, but I think that's what we've kind of learned, at least from Notre Dame here, if not from college football as a whole in this virus season.
Just the fact, Patrick, one of the times really to concentrate on the fundamentals is the spring, because you don't have to prepare for a game week after week. There you can just concentrate on the individual improvements, working on a lot of the fundamentals and all, but you get 15 spring practices taken away from you. The summer, you don't start until later in August 12th. And then you even begin quite cautiously. Navy head coach Ken Niumatalolo, he himself said they had zero contact or tackling at all in the spring out of erring on the side of caution. And he said he'd do it again. But, it showed up. Other teams, they did it, I guess, but it's still not the same. And I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm just trying to theorize as to what went into maybe these defensive lapses that can occur. And I think that some of those reasons are plausible, because in a game like football especially, tackling is one of the fundamental elements. It's blocking and it's tackling. And when you don't have that practice, when you don't have that repetition, it's going to suffer and it's going to manifest itself. Conversely, when you have the experience like Notre Dame does along the offensive line and at the quarterback position, that type of continuity and recognition and familiarity with everything, I think, really works to Notre Dame's advantage.
You would have never known based on the offensive performance that Notre Dame didn't play for 3 weeks and didn't practice for what I think it was 9 days. So just as maybe, all right, we've kind of learning, all right, maybe defense is a harder thing to do when we have to pause. That if for whatever reason it happens to Notre Dame again, the offensive experience will mitigate any concerns there. And I still think there were some good defensive, at least numbers that came from this. Like you mentioned, Florida State had 9 points in the final 3 quarters. They were 2 of 14 on third down. I think you have to like that. The yards per play, a little shaky. I think it was 5.7, I want to say. Let me look real quick and confirm here. Yes, 5.7 yards a play. That's a little high. Anyway, I mean, I think you saw, we kind of see the patchwork nature of it with Sean Crawford having to go to corner. And I think you have to at least like what you got there from all right, this position is in kind of disarray, where Brian Kelly told us, Nick McLeod couldn't practice until late in the week. He was unavailable. Clarence Lewis, same thing. So you just kind of had to go emergency situation there. Obviously, Crawford's a cornerback. I thought he performed well given that context. I still think you saw some things of, all right, why he's a fitted safety were, all right, the pass breakups and things like that, where you can see him break on things in front of him, like he did on one pass breakup on a quick hitch to Tamori and Terry, the interception he had on the goal line. Florida State went and turned that around on him when Terry broke in, knew Crawford would bite on it, double move, touchdown. That was that 48-yarder he caught, I believe, early in the third quarter. But yeah, all things considered, could have been worse. But I mean, we heard Brian Kelly say today that they weren't particularly happy with it, and I can understand why. You just saw kind of lapses in assignments and struggling to mainly keep contain on the edge, especially on all those quarterback options, design quarterback runs. I mean, Jordan Travis was over 100 yards when you take out the sacks. That was a lot of their offense. So you're going to see some of that, I'm sure, with Louisville, especially if you look back to last year's game, where that's a lot of what Louisville does: options, outside zone, quarterback run. They've got a quarterback who can present a dual threat in Malik Cunningham. So certainly something you want to clean up. And overall, I guess I would say this about how do you look at it with the layoff in the context of it. And I wouldn't say this in general terms and not just Notre Dame for anyone that's kind of in this spot. It's not like an excuse of, oh, we can just forget about this game and throw it off, but it's definitely an explanation of why a defense that has a really good track record was just kind of leaky for much of the game, even a little bit in that second half when the scoring was down itself.
We've often talked about what happens when a position group can get wiped out for X number of days by the coronavirus. And I think the closest we've seen now was that cornerbacks room, because according to Brian Kelly, both Nick McLeod and Clarence Lewis were not activated until Thursday, 2 days before the Florida State game. And then I think Cam Hart was out of quarantine
on
Friday before the game. So you're looking at 3 of your top 4 corners going into this game, which is why you moved Sean Crawford back from safety. But he hadn't taken reps there for, I guess it's been almost a month and a half or so. He's had experience there. But when you have a position group wiped out like that for a number of weeks, there's also going to be a learning curve, a reintroduction in many ways to the rest of the defense and what you're trying to accomplish overall. And especially Clarence Lewis, still a freshman in so many ways, learning on the fly. Nick McLeod, a graduate transfer who kind of just started learning the system in August as well. So disjointed would be the right word there, but you're grateful. And let's not forget Tariq Bracy. He was out for the South Florida game, I guess, for a similar reason, or at least he was made unavailable for that game. So he was kind of in a recovery phase as well. So that's been the one position group that probably would qualify as the closest to having or being wiped out for an extended period.
Yeah, it's just kind of one thing that's teams are going to deal with across the country, and really it could have been a lot worse for Notre Dame, and I think that's when you look at the struggles and defense as a whole, take that into account, and that the game kind of reminded me of the Louisville game last year in the opener, where, all right, you've got a offense that in general is hard to stop without a lot of film on it with the personnel involved. Opening game where just like 3 weeks off, training camp can't replicate game speed per se. So there's a little bit of, I don't think it's jitters, but just like wake up in a sense where you can kind of knock down your heels maybe when you weren't expecting it, but then over time kind of settling in, adjust, whatever it might be. And just like Notre Dame did here with whatever method it was that kept Florida State off the scoreboard in the last 3 quarters. All right, so let's talk about the offense. I think there's a lot to unpack here, but first we're going to take a quick timeout. Notre Dame's offensive line. Lou, in all the years you've been covering this, where does that rank among just dominant performances by that group that you've seen in your decades covering Notre Dame football?
Oh, let's not forget, 2 years ago, this they won the Joe Moore Award, and there was a performance against Boston College where you had two different running backs run for more than 200 yards, or actually Brandon Wimbush, a quarterback, and Josh Adams, 219 and 207 yards. There's been plenty. And look, the Joe Moore Award is named after a guy who coached here, and I saw a lot of those lines as well against some of the best competition in the country, and established themselves with that dominance. I mean, a lot of people are right now touting it as perhaps the best line in the country. I'd pump the brakes a little bit on that yet, because even though Florida State does have a lot of players that will be in the NFL, especially along that front line, it's kind of a program in flux right now.
And they were not disruptive.
Yeah, no, but that's again a credit to Notre Dame. And what I like seeing is that they're good with the physical aspect, they're good with the lateral, they're good with the finesse aspect if they have to be, at pulling when they need to be. So there's both athleticism and physical power, and it could be, the best line in the country this year. There was a reason why back in June, when we had to find a cover for our 160-page yearbook, usually it's a singular person, like Ian Book last year or Josh Adams before that. We said, this is the year to put the five-man starting offensive line on the line. And we used the cover headline, laying it on the line, for a reason. The success of the 2020 Notre Dame team was going to be really dictated in great part by the most veteran and experienced offensive line that has ever returned to Notre Dame. 114 career starts. Brian Kelly has mentioned many times there's maybe not a Quentin Nelson or a Ronnie Stanley or a Mike McGlinchey or a Zach Martin, an individual who's a future All-Pro there. But collectively, as a five-man group, this may be the best communicating line that he's ever had. And I think so far, from what we have seen, I think that's going to hopefully continue to play out that way. Let's face it, they're going to be judged on the Clemson game, going against them. That's always the game that's going to count. They're going to have a very, very good pit line that they're going to go up against as well in 2 weeks. But those will be the real litmus test when we start using the word dominant.
Yeah, I think our cover choices, I think we made the right call there. So shouts to everybody who made that call. It definitely wasn't me. But I guess what I would say with, all right, the Clemson litmus test, whatnot, is obviously we won't know until that game happens how it can hold up. But this is what you wanted to see in these games against whatever teams or teams that have decent talent, but for whatever reason it doesn't show up or it doesn't rise to the sum of its parts, I guess. I mean, in only 4 other games this century has Notre Dame averaged more than 8.4 yards a carry. I mean, that's what you want. And look, we can just think all along about, okay, this is a one-game season or a one-game thing for if this line is good enough. But I don't know. I mean, you can appreciate that kind of number for what it is. I mean, they've played a lot of okay teams and haven't done this. And even you can only play who's in front of you and only play who's on the schedule. So if you look at this game and say, it's not enough or it's still not good, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, at that point, I just think you're kind of a skeptic of it's just not going to go well and you're just made up your mind on that. And that's fine. Like, if you don't think Notre Dame can physically match up with Clemson in the line of scrimmage and you're just predetermined to think that, all right, I'm not going to say it's like the stupidest take in the world or anything, but I think you can at least appreciate that this hasn't been done And if Clemson or Notre Dame is to match up front with Clemson, this is exactly what you want to see against the schedule that Notre Dame has been given.
Hey,
So
let's not forget,
that's all I can really say. Like,
Patrick, last year, I think in the first two games against Louisville and New Mexico, neither of which were juggernauts defensively. In fact, they were ranked among the worst in the country. I believe in those two games, Notre Dame was 1 for 10 in third down situations of 3rd and 3 or less in converting it. And there was just a tremendous outcry. It's like, my gosh, you can't get a yard or 2 or 3 against Louisville or New Mexico. What's going to happen and all? Well, they still finished 11-2. They were a very good pass blocking team, but there's always that criticism about the line just not getting that push, and whether it was technique or what the point of emphasis was, what wasn't the point. It was that they were not getting the job done. That has not been a concern this year, as far as they've been doing what they've been expected to do. It's just that ultimately Notre Dame has been there, done that. They're 36-6 over the last 42 games. They're an established top 10 program. So when you have achieved so much, the one benchmark that you're still always looking at is, how are they going to do against the top, the cream of the crop? Last year I said that the only 3 games Notre Dame would be judged by in 2019 would be at Georgia, at Michigan, and USC. And it was a very good 11-2 season, but the repeated failures in those marquee type of games, Georgia and Michigan, they always come back. Once you've established yourself as a program, this where it's like, when are you getting to that top level? So what I'm saying is, in a game like against Clemson, if you're held to like 54 or 80 or 30 yards rushing on 20 carries, like you were against Georgia both in 2017 and 2019. 2019, they didn't even try to run. They had 14 carries for 46 yards down there, because it's like it's a lost cause. That's not the approach and the attitude this year, whether it would be Georgia or Clemson or anyone else. So I'm expecting them to play very well. I'm not saying a 250 or 200-yard performance, but and I don't like to put arbitrary numbers on it either, Patrick, but in a game like against Clemson, you've got to be able to pick up the yards, 3rd and 2, in those clutch situations. You can only have like 130 to 150 yards rushing. But if they're like 5 yards a clip and they help open up other areas of the game, then you've achieved your objective and you've become that next level type of program if you can come away with that type of victory.
And to go off what you said, I mean, I don't know if it was 1 for 10 in those 2 games. When I looked at New Mexico, I had 5 for 9 in those 3rd and shorts when they ran. But your point remains. Something looked off, didn't pass the eye test, wasn't dominant, whatever you want to call it, against a team that it should have kicked the crap out of. So I think you can be encouraged more than you ever had before that, yeah, these guys can block anyone they face, including a Clemson or Georgia or whatever. Who knows what will happen? We'll find out in a month. But you can be as optimistic as you ever have that they can block those guys. If you're going to beat those kinds of teams, you got to block them. And even if it's not their A blocking game, I think you look at their running backs and say, they can make guys miss, create their own yards. That was missing. I like this group as a complement to a good offensive line more than the 2017 one or Josh Adams. I think the Kyron Williams' ability to make guys miss and juke guys out of tackles like he did a lot on Saturday is something that maybe wasn't necessarily there in recent years. Chris Tyree's got a lot of that. So all that ingredient of a rushing operation, I think it has as good a chance at stacking up against anybody as anything has. I mean, these seem like Clemson level players, right? I mean, we'll see if they can get it done against them. I'd be pretty worried at least about this is going to be a good Clemson line after what they did to Miami, but I mean, I think you can be as optimistic as you would have been with the question of how's it going to go against really good team, top flight team, whatever. All right, let's move on to passing game. I thought this was Ian Book's best game, at least of the year. Uh, Lou, I mean, what did you see out of how Notre Dame threw the ball when it wanted to?
I wouldn't disagree. I think he took his shots downfield, had a great 36-yard pass to Javon McKinley, and later a 38-yard pass. Was able to stretch the defenses. They took a shot with Kevin Austin down the field deep early on. They wanted to at least make them aware that it wasn't just going to be a dink and dunk type game. Uh, Considering that you're playing three tight ends most of the time on your snaps, I don't know if people are necessarily expecting you to go vertical much, but I thought his presence in the pocket was very good. The pass blocking, I thought, again, was outstanding. And when there was the rush, he just has that knack of sensing, feeling where it's coming from. And I've always just thought that his escapability and scrambling skills were highly underrated. Maybe he relies on them almost too much because he is very good with that escapability. But I would agree with you. I thought this was the type of performance that you can really build on and hopefully continue over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and if this is kind of the script for most of the season, where they need him to be good, but don't need him to be the reason they win because they can run on a lot of teams, I think you'll take that. And he was good. And there were a couple of throws that stood out to me. One was the completion to Michael Mayer in the red zone that set up a touchdown.
Yeah.
It wasn't his touchdown. That to me was a like I'm going to be a badass. I'm going to fit this throw in a tight window. Slid it over a linebacker, perfect touch on it. Got it in between a window that was closing quickly where Meyer was. So I thought that was just an example of like, I'm confident in what I see. I'm just going to go make this throw because I can. And I don't think you necessarily saw enough of that last year. And then the shot to McKinley in the third quarter, or the 38-yarder, that was kind of the same thing. No play action, like we talked about before. That had been a thing that Notre Dame had kind of leaned on to open up some things downfield, even for someone like McKinley or Bennett Skowronek or whoever, or receivers you didn't necessarily think are like game breakers, game changers. You can win one-on-ones. But anyway, no play action. It was against a blitz and against a good corner in Asante Samuel Jr. That's a draft pick. And Book saw all of that and is like, yeah, I'm still going to throw this. I'm going to throw this one-on-one and just trust my guy to go make a play like he would have with a Chase Claypool last year. And like he didn't necessarily do that familiarity, chemistry, trust, whatever wasn't there in the first couple of games. So I thought that was encouraging. And the pocket presence, like you said, I thought it was good. I don't think he bailed too early or whatever. There was a throw to Avery Davis, that one catch in the second half where I thought he got flushed out and left at the right time, kept his eyes downfield, made the throw, and that's the playmaking outside of the structure of the play that I think has been a strength of his. But you look at that and say that's what that's supposed to look like. And yeah, if you want to complain about, okay, 2 of 6 on 20-plus yard throws, okay, fine. I like the 6 as just the attempt number. I think that stood out more than the 2 because, I mean, what's been kind of the thing with him overall is a narrative of like he doesn't throw them enough, he doesn't see guys. So I'm okay with that, especially if you attempt 6 of those throws. I think that's a good sign. And Kevin Austin's first snap, he dialed one up for him. Yeah, Tommy Tremble was open on a corner route, but I think everyone on the coaching staff and or even in general should be okay with that. It was just, I just want to see what this guy can do in his first game, and let's just stretch your field and see if this guy can make a play.
Yeah, and with 6 passes downfield of 20 yards, who knows how many other completions during the evening among those 16 was helped made possible by maybe the safety having to go back a little bit, being aware that they are going to take shots deep, and then that opens up things in the intermediate or shorter routes. I think,
It did.
the screen game, Patrick, they've left. I'd venture to say close to well over 100 and maybe even close to 200 yards on the field. If they just connect with timing, um, which I think will get better as the season goes on, uh, where there's the openings there. You see it set up, but either the pass is a little bit thrown early or just bounces off the fingertips. We saw that against Duke, and we saw that against Florida State a couple times too, where it wasn't kind of just quite in sync. And you can see there's the 30, 40, 50 yards maybe left on the field. Um, if it had been connected. And I did look it up here, but last year, Notre Dame started 0-5 on its first, uh, in the first three games against Louisville, New Mexico, and Georgia. It was 0-5 on 3rd-and-1 situations.
Oof.
And it ended the season 0-4, but in between, at least it was 21 of 23. So that included 4-4 in the 30-27 win over USC. So that counts there. But early on, there were these same issues and problems.
Yeah, Kyron Williams is already tied for the team lead in receiving yards. That's 114. He probably could have doubled it if there's a couple of those screens had been able to connect on. But I mean, people still respect it. I mean, the McKinley got open on that throw I talked about because his defender bit on the screen fake or just show the screen that Williams ran on that play. So in each of these first three games, and I think this is kind of interesting because we'd spent a lot of time talking about the receivers and what can this group do, and for good reason. 9 catches from the receivers. That's 2 less than they had in the first 2 games combined. On the whole, when you go back to previous years and previous book starts, it's still not a ton. I think we've in some ways come to learn that this isn't a particularly deep receiving core, but maybe in this offensive structure, receiver depth can be a little overrated. I mean, you want to have like the game breaker types in there, like what we all think Kevin Austin can be, or what Braden Lindsey could be with his speed and whatnot, or certainly have performances like Javon McKinley's. But when you're playing base 12 personnel or 13 personnel, it's not just in goal lines. Like, okay, you're taking receivers off the field there. You only need a couple of receivers. So I think that at least lessens the idea that you've got to have like 5 who you can trust. I mean, you need a couple of, say, game breakers, and I think that's what Notre Dame really lacked in the first couple games. And then you still have some questions about how quickly he can get there. All right, Kevin Austin's got to go prove it. He can be that now. But when you have the multiple tight ends out there and multiple tight ends that are like receiving threats, that's a big deal. Michael Myers' touchdown came when there were 3 tight ends on the field. And the whole point in throwing the ball is let's get matchups that favor us on our best guys. That's just that's like a basic principle, right? And in a lot of times, okay, that's fast receivers downfield who no one can run with, like Tamorrion Terry, Alabama or LSU's groups last year and whatnot. Michael Myers, probably their toughest matchup. Like, who wants to cover that guy? Who has really succeeded in covering him so far? Not really anybody, right? So that's what you want to lean on, go to. I know we've seen in limited samples last year of what Tommy Tremble can be as a deep threat, and it's certainly a lot to be encouraged about what you can do with him. Hasn't had a ton of targets in the last couple of games, in against Florida State, he had 1 catch. But if those are your matchup problems you can present, you'd be kind of foolish not to go to them. And that means, all right, you're taking some receivers off the field a little bit. I think that's okay if you have more Michael Meyer, more Tommy Tremble, of you've got guys that are tough to guard.
we talk all the time about what is your identity, and many times there was a criticism during the Brian Kelly era is, well, they don't have an identity. What I have found through the years is when somebody says they don't have an identity, it's like they don't have an identity that I want to see. I want to see five receivers, spread
Right.
out and going all over this place or something. This is what their identity is. This is who they are. Just like 3 years ago, 2017, it's like, okay, we got Mike McGlinchey, we got Quentin Nelson, we got Alex Bars, we got Sam Mustipher, we got veterans all over on the line. These are future pros. We got a really good running back with Josh Adams and Dexter Williams, and we don't have really a great passing quarterback, but he's a fabulous athlete and runner with Brandon Wimbush. Gee, what are we going to do? Are we going to spread five receivers out and throw it all over the place like that? They found the identity of who they wanted to be, and they finished seventh in the country in rushing, almost 270 yards a game. That's who they are. With Ian Book, they were somebody else. Now they're looking at their identity again. It's a veteran line, not necessarily an experienced pass receiving core at wideout. You have a number of backs, quick, fast backs who can hit holes quickly. They have that outside zone combination, and they have an efficient quarterback. They know who they are. Stay in your lane. Don't, if you try to be everything, let's go five wide, let's go three tight ends. When you try to be great at everything, you're good at nothing. It's like, let's have what identity is, and the other items will be auxiliary elements. That's who they are right now. If they're not going deep as often as they want, they'll try. They'll try to see, but you have to play to your strengths, and that's what Notre Dame's strength is right now.
So I have every time I tweet about uh, multiple tight ends or running the ball or whatever, or things around this identity that Notre Dame seems to find. I had there's one guy in my mentions. I don't remember the user name, but shouts to this guy who's like, "No, this can't be explosive. It doesn't work in college football." Blah blah blah. And uh, I just don't really feel like ultimately engaging in Twitter conversation too much. But it's like, it's basically the rebuttal to that is exactly what we just talked about. Like, who's Michael Meyer not playing for? Like, look at his offer list and see who wanted him. Who looks at him and says, "Oh yeah, I got a defense who can shut that guy down." Yeah, I'm not sure anybody out there can do that. So yeah, I mean, you just be kind of foolish not to go to that and go to all these sets that you can get him the ball out of. And of course, yeah, we'll see if obviously Kevin Austin becomes that game changer that they do need. But yeah, you look at right now, yeah, we don't have great receiver depth. We still got some things we got to iron out there. Let's just go to this, and we've got mismatches. And that's what matters when you try to throw the ball in no matter what way, shape, or form. Get mismatches. Notre Dame's got some of those guys. Lou, I know Clemson beat Miami and it wasn't close. I am still not selling my stock shares in Miami. I don't think this game is a referendum. Oh, they're pretenders, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They're frauds. It wasn't good. I mean, the game was never close. I mean, Miami had 4 first downs in 3 quarters. That's bad. But I came out of that thinking, wow, Clemson's still really awesome. Their defensive front is as talented as it's been. And that was with that 3 first-round pick one that had won the title a couple years ago. So I still think Miami's the 3rd best team in the ACC, 4th at worst if you're just a Carolina fan, been predisposed to be that from the beginning of the season from what you thought. So yeah, I came out of that, or at least looking at the box score. Obviously didn't watch a game of no, Miami is still good, still can be good, but yeah, Clemson's going to be a tough out.
Yeah. I think with so many years, everyone wants to have that the U is back, the U is back. And when you keep having to say that, that's when you're not back. You'll know when they're back.
Yeah, I
And
mean, when they're winning national titles,
or yeah,
I'm not sure that's the expectation now, but
or
they'll be competitive. Yeah.
or when you start winning these type of games. It's the same with Notre Dame. It's, well, when is Notre Dame? When you have to keep explaining, well, then you're not back. You got to beat the Clemsons. You got to beat the Alabamas. You've got to slay the dragons there until you're back. You've got to get the brass ring. And that's not diminishing what Notre Dame has achieved, because they've achieved a lot in these last 3 years and going on to the fourth year. But ultimately, that's the why are they playing the games at Notre Dame? That they have a standard. Brian Kelly talks about it all the time. Graduate players win championships. Well, there you have it.
Yeah, and look, like Miami's the same thing because it is not that far removed from winning or making a bunch of title games, but I don't think it's like all for nothing in particular if you go, I don't know, 10-2 this year or something. Those have been things that have been hard to come by in the last 15 years. So, all right, I mean, I don't know if this is a title winning team. I'm not sure we would have expected it to be, but yeah, I mean, this Miami team can be, I think, as good as anyone since that window closed per se. And I'm not necessarily moving off that just based on this one game. And I mean, look, Clemson's hard to beat. Like you expected this to be closer. That's a fair disappointment, but I don't know. I mean, I just don't think it's, oh, can't beat the team that never loses. All right, you suck. I think there's some kind of middle ground in
Yeah,
between. And I think
exactly.
that's where Miami's going to end up being and which means something because 10-win seasons have been hard to come by for them. So, and I mean, just a year ago, they were losing to schools you can confuse as an airport name.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's
Well,
got to be something that you can still come a long way with that.
yeah,
So,
I'm not convinced yet, Patrick, that they're the third best team, because they have to show it consistently. Last year they ended the season with a shutout loss to Louisiana Tech in the Independence Bowl. I mean, they were losing games they have probably no business to, given the talent level that they have. So we'll see. Maybe North Carolina could be. I think Boston College has been fairly impressive, and right now I think the front runner for Coach of the Year in the ACC is Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech. They were picked dead last, 15th out of 15 teams in the ACC, and they've already beaten Florida State on the road. And to beat Louisville the way they did on Friday night, hey, that's pretty darn impressive right now at this stage.
I will save my Coach of the Year rants for a later podcast. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, I don't want to diminish what Jeff Collins has done in making those guys competitive. That was just a big hurdle that had to be cleared. But I guess back to one final thought here on Miami. I mean, that was last year's team, last year's coaching staff or offensive staff at least. Uh, Last year's quarterback, all that stuff is different. And I mean, they play the games that are on the schedule, and I mean, you can show it. Maybe when you get more games, or when you play more games, or it becomes more clear. But I mean, so far, I'm still gonna stick with that. I think they'll end up finishing top three, or be top three in some seeding thing or whatever. I mean, and obviously it was humbling, but in the other three games, I think there was still a lot to be impressed with, that they can beat most of the other challengers on their schedule. But yeah, I mean, Carolina put up 56 points on a very undermanned but still talented Virginia Tech team, and they can score. But yeah, I think that was what Carolina wanted to see after some offensive ups and downs and things in the first couple of weeks. And yeah, I think we've identified Notre Dame's second biggest offensive, or the defense's second biggest challenge, is that Carolina game and stopping that passing game.
Yeah, very skeptical about their number 5 rating in the national polls there. I think that we all felt that Carolina this year could be a top 20, maybe top 15 team. Right now at number 5, you have some doubts. But look, it's way too early to be talking about polls and everything else like that. That will sort itself out in time.
Yeah, I think that ranking is just kind of a function of the weird poll year it is, where you've got teams that, all right, we think are going to be better than Carolina, just haven't played yet. And if you're trying to rank and compare them, well, you take a team that hasn't played and a team that's three and zero or whatever Carolina is, and
Yep.
that's what you rank. But yeah, I wouldn't read a whole lot into that either. Parting thought again. I'm not. I said what I needed to say on Phil Dracovic last week about you guys aren't going to make it if every throw is a referendum on the decision and whatever. But yeah, he had his best game of the year probably against a good Pitt defense.
Yeah, he did a great job. I mean, you take your hat off to him. Congratulations, but Ian Book was still going to be the starter this year, so that's why he left for Boston College. And
Among other reasons. But yes,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and yeah, another tough one for Pitt, losing on an extra point miss. Swear this must be hard for consistently being so close to pulling off an upset, and for whatever reason, just not being able to get there. Kicking has not been their friend in those games. But all right, Lou, let's get out of here. We'll talk to you on Thursday. Preview that Notre Dame Louisville game. Again, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Leave us 5 stars and nice comments if you liked what you heard. We'll love you forever. Hit that thumbs up button on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Till then, take care.